Hello, everybody. This is Riley from the Perfect Fourth podcast. I just wanted to make a quick note that Kenny's audio messed up while recording. He tested it multiple times, and even after that, it's still messed up. So there was nothing that we could really do about it. Thankfully, it's not super egregious. It's still listenable, and you can understand what he's talking about, but it may cause annoyance in some listeners. Thank you, and on to the podcast.
Brought to you by BOGO. BOGO. Eat it, nerd.
3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Perfect Fourth, a name that currently is subject to change. My name is Riley.
Subject to change?
Well, it's a working title.
I like the title.
I do too.
I like the title, too.
Oh, no, it's a good
I'm
title.
Kenny, by the way.
Hey, what's up? It's me, Alex.
That's Alex. Oh, I'm Andy.
Yeah.
Hi.
All right.
And we are a group of 4 teenagers that decided to talk about music for however long we decide to talk about it.
Well, specifically albums, I guess.
It was specifically albums, but we'll talk about other things as well. What's the over-under on us looking back on this in 5 years and just cringing out our asses?
I don't know. Like that kind of seems inevitable for most things. That's what
Yeah,
what happened last time.
Yeah, but
in only
this
2
isn't
years.
like AudioCast where we're talking about we're literally talking out of our ass for like an hour, and we don't say anything of substance.
You should censor that. You should censor
for-
podcasts.
Hey, editor.
No, it's fine. For those of you that don't know, me and Andy, we had a music podcast for this called AudioCast, and it was super dumb and lame and awful.
There were like 3
but
or for like 4 episodes.
there
There
were
were
3
3.
episodes that we released. There was a 4th.
We did record
yes.
a 4th. No, or we planned to record a 4th, but
No, we
it
recorded that 4th episode, but we never released it for some reason.
Didn't we? Oh, okay.
No, yeah, we recorded. I remember.
Oh yeah,
talking
we
about
did.
this
Okay,
stuff
so we
with you.
recorded the 4th one, and then at the structure of that podcast, that now defunct podcast, is very eerily similar to the one of this podcast, and we'll get back to that one once we get to section B. But I guess we should probably formally begin the first segment.
All right,
Do you want to
So,
take us in?
I will take us in because it was my idea to talk about this album. But the first album that we are going to talk about, and what we've decided to do is the first section of the podcast. We're going to be either talking about a newer album or some sort of recent news in music, or we might decide to do an artist spotlight. It's essentially player's choice. And then the second half of the album, we will talk about an album that has been recommended on the podcast previous.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be in on what we're talking about, be sure to listen to that album before we release the podcast that the album that we talk about is on.
If you don't, it's fine. We don't discriminate
Yeah.
in real life.
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
In real life, yeah, we're actually forcing you to listen to this.
You can take this as like a recommendation for the albums too, I guess, if you're looking to listen to it. But I don't know.
Yeah, depends on what we say. Yeah.
Your prerogative.
If there is a reason that you've been trying to find to listen to it, this is your reason. But moving on into the album that I wanted to talk about, a relatively new album. It was released about a month ago, around that time.
Yeah, January 29th, 2021.
Yes. Okay. And the album that we are talking about is Sound Ancestors by Madlib. This is his first solo project in 7 years since the Rock Conducta series that he had started. And of course, he's done projects like Pinata, Bad Neighborhood, the last one that he did, Bandana, with Freddie Gibbs. But this is his first solo album in quite a while. And I thought it would be an interesting album to start the podcast to talk about.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the album?
Okay. Does somebody want to go? Do you want to go first?
No, you guys go
Well,
first.
okay, here's the thing with me is these 3 are much more of music connoisseurs than I am. But
No, I'm definitely not. I just kind of listen to music. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Well,
Anything goes, I guess.
Yeah.
So, going into this, I had no expectations, really. And as I was listening to it, I just took a couple of notes. In overall, I'd say I was actually pretty surprised. There were a few tracks that weren't really kind of my thing, but there were definitely some tracks that I have now gone back to since the first listen, which was from the time we're recording this about 2 days ago. So overall, I'd say it was actually a pretty fun listen.
I think pretty fun listen is a good way to describe it. I feel like all of the drums in this album, I don't really know if anybody else relates to this, but they're infectious. They're really good. All of the percussion on this album is really good.
Madlib,
it's Madlib we're talking about.
After all,
Madlib pays really good attention to how his drums sound on nearly every project that he works on. And I am, as someone who has listened to quite a bit of Madlib, I am proud to say that this album delivers. Going back again to the fact that this is his first solo album in quite a while, he's changed the way that he's produced quite a bit from what I've heard. His last album, Bandana, that he did with Freddie Gibbs, he spoke in interviews about how he started using more digital forms of audio production, because back in like the early 2000s when he was working with Stone's Throw, MF Doom, Jay Dilla, all of those people, he was staunchly analog only. He would only work with vinyl records, tape.
Really?
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
he's very, very, very into the analog stuff. He would only use analog samplers and all that stuff. And then maybe, like, down the road, it would be sent into a digital master and all that stuff. I remember hearing somewhere that he was even opposed to sampling off of CDs just because they were a more digital format. In his earlier production, he was very, very, very staunchly, like, pro analog. And you can hear that in a lot of his beats, a lot of the stuff off of Quasimodo.
No, that was kind of the stuff that surprised me, because like I didn't check I didn't check when the album released. I didn't know anything about the album before I listened to it, and like it surprised me that this is an album that came out literally this year. It sounds like it could have come out really at any time. Like it's
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty timeless. It took me by surprise that this was a recent thing. It could have been released like whenever.
I don't know how accurate. I don't know how accurate it is to say, like, if because I'm not too well versed in the school of Madlib here, but I don't know how accurate it is to say if he's like cut from the cloth of the old school, I guess, if you want to say it like that. But yeah, like, there's definitely a lot of different. It's like Alex said, it's very hard to place a time period on this album. Like, if you could basically tell me that it was literally any year between like 1990 and like now, and I'd probably believe you no matter what you said. It's like, I don't know, like, was this made to be an album, or was these just like a lot of these just like kind of stray files? Because I know like Fortet kind of curated a lot of this.
So Madlib's production, like the way that he produces a lot of those beats, he's incredibly prolific. You can just go to a Spotify page and see all the things that he's released, and it's pretty impressive. But the way that he's recorded just random beats and musical ideas, from what I understand, he just has this sort of idea and then he moves on to the next thing. So that's why he hasn't really released like a ton of solo albums as of late, because mostly they're just musical ideas that he like works on for like a week and then he moves on to the next thing. And so when Fortet approached him to say like, hey, there are so many good musical ideas that you've created, let me take those and construct them into actual songs. That's really the foundation of this album, is Madlib taking all the samples and the beat ideas, crafting those beats, and then Fortet taking them and arranging them into full songs, which I thought was really interesting, because quite honestly, I couldn't tell what exactly was Fortet and what was Madlib. I've heard some of Fortet's stuff before, like I heard his remix EP of Mad Villainy, and I've heard like a few other things that he's done. But this really did sound like a Madlib album, and going back to what I was saying about his production, like a lot of his older stuff, they're just bathed in this like nostalgic fuzz. Like a lot of the beats off of Quasimodo, they have like just a slight amount of bit crush on them, and there are these really warm, just enveloping loops.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, with Bandana, he's started to move into more digital forms of production, like iPads and stuff like that. And what I thought was interesting about this album, in terms of its sound, is that it actually sounds much more sort of isolated and reflective and cold, not necessarily bathed in that warm glow that Madlib is known for and what sort of put him on the map. And I don't know if that's necessarily because of the style of production that he's moved to, or if that has anything to do with Fortet's inclusion. But anyways, I think that he pulls that particular sound off really, really well on this album. I love how crisp everything sounds on this album.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's hard to like kind of pinpoint good vocabulary to say for this album, because I don't want to keep repeating things that have already been said. But like, I don't know, I'm not too like I said before, I'm essentially a stranger to Madlib's production, aside from a few like songs I've heard off of Mad Villainy, which I still need to listen to that full album and discography. But either way, yeah, like Madlib's production style is like at least vaguely familiar to me, but this, I don't know if what Riley's saying is like as true as or like if what Riley's saying is accurate. Hopefully this is like a good introduction to his work, I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
Like, I don't know how much coldness I really got from this record, so to speak.
I mean, I hadn't listened to anything prior, and I was impressed. Especially there weren't really any tracks on this that I thought were like boring in any way. It was all like,
yeah,
it was all pretty it was engaging all the way through. There were a few tracks that weren't really kind of my pace or my style, but all in all, I can definitely say that this was an engaging album.
I personally, I think, what was it? I think Sound Ancestors sounded kind of, I think it sounded cool, right? It was Sound Ancestors, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just felt like it, okay.
Only a little
the
bit.
album, the single.
Yeah, the song, yeah.
The single, the song, whatever. I felt like it just got kind of annoying. The same thing with Doombaye.
Oh, the closing
really?
track?
Yeah.
I disagree. Those are two of my favorite tracks.
No, I seriously got annoyed at Doombaye, but everything else I honestly really enjoyed, because I especially liked the third track, the second track, and the 13th track. I thought those were all pretty solid.
What was track 13 again?
Really? Latino Negro. I disagree about the 13th track. That's actually my least favorite track on the album.
Really?
And the reason why is because it starts out as just this like really groovin' sort of Latin vamp, right? Where it's just this band sort of riffing on this however long the loop is, and it keeps going. And it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it doesn't have any real progression. And I'd be fine if it didn't have a lot of progression. Honestly, a lot of these songs don't have a ton of progression,
like
right? There are a few that stand out, like Hop Rock or 2 for 2, 1 for Quartabe. But the 13th track, it's the second longest on the album, and it has almost no progression whatsoever. And I just felt really bored. I mean, it's not a bad song per se, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It's a nice groove, but a nice groove for 3.5 minutes.
I don't know if I would rather be like bored of a song or annoyed at a song.
That's a pretty good question, actually. Like, I don't know. Well, it depends how many boring songs are there and how many annoying songs are there, like, in a row, right? Would you rather listen to an annoying album or a boring album, right?
An annoying album?
See, we'll get to this later with the next album we're going to talk about, but
yeah,
at least for me personally.
Wow,
for me personally. But we'll talk about it.
I guess we have the answer. Wow. Okay.
No, but we're not. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Andy.
Yo.
I don't really think I got an answer. Like, did you like this album?
Oh, yeah.
Did you like this album?
Yeah, I really like this album. I was gonna bring this up earlier, but one of the biggest things I usually experience in instrumental albums, like memorability upon first listen, is a big, like, what's the opposite of a red flag? Like a Like a red flag is a flag that signals something bad.
Flag.
I want a flag that signals something really good.
Like a
Green flag.
All right. The checkered flag.
An enticing quality. I don't know.
But like a big signal that this was really good was like, because memorability is really big, and one of the biggest problems that I have with instrumental albums usually is just that upon first listen, or especially instrumental albums where like it's a lot of tracks and most of them are really short, is that I leave and I'm like, oh, that was really good, but then I can't like remember any of the tracks from memory because they all were like super short and there was like a ton of them and I can't remember almost any. But like this album, I could recall like a good number of them, and I was like, when that happens on first listen, it's like it's just a signal that you're listening to something really memorable and really good. So the fact that I didn't experience that with this album, which almost happens every time with every instrumental album that's like this, is pretty big. Because I'm just not used to that, I guess. But going back to what like Kenny said about the last track, I really like that track. I don't know what.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know where that sample is from.
It's such a bizarre sample, and he uses it so much in the track. But again, on like the 13th track, he like builds upon it. Like the instruments start like playing along with it, and I just find it so much fun. For those of you that haven't listened, it's this constant repeating of this phrase like dum 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 ba yay, and it just keeps on going pretty much. And there's like a little bit of a B section, but it just sounds so interesting, and it really left me with a pretty strong impression. I really liked it.
I thought it was like I did think it was interesting. I did think it was fun. I did think it was like objectively it did good at the song, at what the song does, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just like a minute, like not a minute in, when there was a minute left, I was like, please get this over with.
It's one of those songs that you kind of like, for some, like you kind of can't help but keep checking the progress bar there.
I disagree. Yeah. I can get completely lost in that track, and most of this album, honestly.
Well, there is one track that I could get completely lost in it. It is my favorite track, and I want to ask like everybody's favorite tracks. But my absolute favorite track on this album was "Road to the Lonely Ones."
Yeah, that's definitely a highlight. Yep.
I like the songs, like I like songs that like kind of surprise me, and obviously I didn't have really any expectations going into this album, but with the first three tracks, they were like, I really enjoyed the first three tracks, but I don't know, it was feeling like it was setting like kind of a tone for the rest of the album, and then fourth track comes in, and I'm grooving to the maximum. It's such a good song, and it is the song that I've gotten to back the most since I first listened to the album.
What's your guys' favorite track? As Alex asked.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. With the Road to the Lonely Ones, and I guess 1B. If I could do that, would be One for Quantabe and Right Now.
Yeah, that one's another really great one in my opinion.
That song was great. Or those songs were great, I guess.
My Road to the Lonely Ones is another highlight for me as well. I feel like it's the first like the first point where the album like really hits its stride. I love the first three tracks. There Is No Time is a great mood setter for the album. I love the call. I love how funky it is. I love how chill Theme to Crabtree is.
Theme to Crabtree. I think has some of the best drums in the album.
Theme to Crabtree's nuts. It's
like Road to the Lonely Ones. It's such a strange song because, like, while it is very groovy, it has a good sense of rhythm to it. At the same time, it's also very sort of dreary and despondent. Like, you have these really haunting, like, looped, like, vocals in the background that are just holding out this tone, and it's so high pitched and up there. It gives me chills. And then there's the constant crooning of Road to the Lonely Ones, and it instills such a mood. And I feel like this entire album, it's a good mood album. I'll say.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, it's definitely a good mood album.
There are some albums that you just kind of can't like focus on, or not. I say can't focus on, but like that if you just like look at them and like pay attention to them, it's like if you like pay close attention and like examine like a Playboi Carti record, you're gonna not like it. That's the reason, like, oh, I don't like trap. That's because you're listening to it with like your hands clasped, like just paying attention to only the like that's not how you listen to an album like that or an artist like that. And this is I don't want to like bring Madlib into cahoots with Playboi Carti because those are like two opposite ends of the spectrum. But in terms of like genre, not quality, I don't want to diss Carti, but either way, this is definitely an album that I think is really good to like listen to and be like, just don't worry about paying attention to all of it. Like if you pay,
just like do work while you're listening.
This is it's a really good work album. It's a very good like it's a very good album to just have on in the background.
That's a good way to put it, actually.
And it didn't answer. Favorite track is The Call. Definitely, I love The Call.
Yeah,
I love.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know where the sample's from. I recognize the voice. I want to like. I have a
Paul McCartney.
Probably like that's what I was gonna guess, but I was afraid of being called like stupid by Mr. Beatles over here. But
no, that's not a Beatles voice, I will say. But I will say, The Call, it's an interesting one for Madlib because it's not a genre that he usually samples from, like 70s like rock and stuff like that. And I haven't heard Rock Conductor, but apparently he does sample more like rock music in that series. But he usually pulls from R&B, soul, funk, jazz, like all the staples, right? And I love the bass line on that song. It's so heavy, it's so thick. It's really grooving. But another one of my favorites that's up there with Road to the Lonely Ones for me is 2 for 2 for Dilla. I love it so much. It starts out with this really heavy like funk flip. And it's just grooving so hard with these like synchronized like drum and bass like lines, and it just syncs up so perfectly. And then eventually there's this really sort of ethereal transition, and then you get to the second half of that song and it is straight out of the J Dilla playbook. It sounds like it could come like straight off of the Donuts track list, and I wouldn't even notice that anything had changed. It features these like wonderfully chopped soul vocals, and it just layers so perfectly, and it just induces such a vibe and a rhythm that every time I hear it, I can't help but just move my head along to it. It's so intoxicating. I love it so much.
Well, I wanted to say one more thing. I just want to give like a closing thought. Overall, I typed the word vibe more than I really ever have in my life into this one notes page than anything. I think that's a good thing, because like for Hop Rock. For Hop Rock, I'm only gonna get this reference, but I typed Lego designer video type beat, and
that's
we didn't even really mention
makes sense
Hop Rock.
to me.
Hop Rock is another like really big highlight on the album, in my opinion. I love Hop Rock.
Yeah. It's just that was the first thing that came to my mind. But if we are gonna move to the next,
hold on. Do we want to do favorite tracks, least favorite track, and score?
Well, we did favorite track, but like
Oh, I have like a full list.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, let's go around.
Okay, I'll say my least favorite track, which I'm pretty sure people can assume now. Dumbaye, Dubiye, I guess, whatever. I just kind of like. I feel like if a song, because it's like I enjoyed the first minute and a half, and then the next 30 seconds, I was like, okay, I'm looking at the progress bar. And then for the next minute, I'm just like, please get this over with. Like, I just can't stand this anymore.
As a closer, I was a bit disappointed.
I was very disappointed by the closer.
I think it's a good track. I don't know if it's the best closer on the album.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like, as a closer, I did. But go on with your favorite, and then score.
Score, I'd say like a 7. I feel like that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
It's like, of course, I really like a lot of the songs on this album, but I'm not sure if this was like an 8 or 6 even like album experience. It's like it wasn't very good. It was good. I enjoyed it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it was bad at all. I think it was just good.
Madlib, I think Madlib's is like in best form and in most recognizably great form when he's working with a really good vocalist. But like obviously when he's instrumental only with like this album, and there are like a lot of vocals on this album, but in terms of like mostly and mainly instrumental things with the only vocals coming really through samples, it's still really good and you get a lot of great results here. But I think like him in peak performance comes when he's working with somebody that has a lot of chemistry with him in terms of vocals. So like that's I'm sure if we did something about like Pinata or Mad Villainy or another one of his like just expansive list of collaborations, I'm sure we'd be in like be much more enthusiastic. But as of like I don't really, well, I guess I have some complaints, but none that are like major enough for me to like keep talking about, I guess. I don't know what my least favorite track is. That's hard to decide for this kind of thing. I think my least favorite, like, I don't know. It's hard to choose a least favorite track for this. It might be Hangout. That was the one I came back to least and, like, struggled to remember the most. But, like, yeah, in terms of, my favorite track I already said was The Call. I don't really want to give, like, a big list because I feel like we'd be kind of repeating stuff then, but yeah, just that's my favorite track. Hangout's probably my least favorite. Score, like, yeah, I agree. Like, I think a 7 is good. Closer to an 8 than a 6, but because it's Madlib. Come on, but
yeah, for me, favorite track was definitely Road to the Lonely Ones. Least favorite track, I didn't really jive too much with Loose Goose. That one just that one didn't really hook me. And then as a score, I mean, if we do go into the 0.5s, I guess that I'd give it a 6.5 overall as like an album experience. That's what I'd give it. But for some different tracks, I'd of course give them different scores. As an album experience, I'd give it a 6.5.
Well, my favorite tracks were There Is No Time, The Call, Theme to Crabtree, Road to the Lonely Ones. I actually really liked Loose Goose. That was one of my favorites. I love the horn samples. I just love how wacky it is. I just find it to be pretty interesting to listen to. Hop Rock, Sound Ancestors, One for Cortabe Right Now. I also really liked Hangout, Phone Off, 2 for 2. The New Normal was one that we didn't really touch on that I thought was an interesting switch up and a type of style that I don't really hear from Madlib. I love how dusty and sort of harsh the synths are on that song. And then Doombaye, and my least favorite track's track 13. And I would give this an 8 out of 10. I really loved this album. From other things that I've heard Madlib on, it's not his best, but from his solo albums that I've heard, the only one that I've also heard as well is Shades of Blue, which is the album that he did in collaboration with Blue Note, where he took a bunch of standards and put his own spin on it. I haven't heard that in a while, so I can't really say how well this compares to that, but I will say that I did enjoy this album quite a bit. I loved it.
Y'all ain't rocking with Rhythm Chant?
Huh?
Y'all ain't rocking with Rhythm Chant? It's a good song.
No, it's pretty lackluster in my opinion.
Song.
Same with Chino. I feel like Chino falls into that category too.
Really, I like Chino as well. I like Chino. Not as well.
And again, I don't think that there's like a bad song on the album. Even my least favorite song really just comes down to the fact that there wasn't much structure. But in comparison to other songs, those two don't really
do it for you. All right,
stand out.
All right, so we're gonna be going on to our next album.
Yeah,
right?
next section.
Yeah,
okay,
so was this one? Was this the recommendation, or was this?
Yes, if you're familiar with 2 years ago when we did Audiocast,
they're
which
not.
is
Andy,
unlisted
you forget
now.
we didn't release this episode.
Well, yeah, if they remember. Okay. No, if you're familiar with how the structure is, then you know it's coming. But this is the period where we recommend, or actually we go over an album that one of us recommended last episode. And we actually chose, and this happened last podcast too, or last podcast series. And last time, on the never released episode of Audiocast, Riley was up for recommendation, and he recommended Float by Aesop Rock. So that's the album we listened to. And then the next person in line is going to recommend one at the end of the podcast. But for now, we're going to talk about Float by Aesop Rock, which released in 1999, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Should I give a little background to this?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do what you want. It's your world, I guess.
This actually released in the year 2000, September 5th to be exact. And this was Aesop Rock's first official studio album. He has projects before this, like I believe it was called like Music from the Graveyard or something like that. And then there's the Appleseed EP. But this is his first official album. And I know Wikipedia mentioned one of those projects was the album beforehand. But this is his first official album. Rhymesayer says that it's his first official album. So this is... Anyways, Aesop Rock, enigmatic underground rapper rhymer. He's been at it for a very long time, as you can tell. He's still at it to this day, with his latest project being Guide to the Spirit World, released last year. Guide. Spirit World Field Guide, sorry. And this is his first project and pretty important project in his catalog in terms of establishing how he writes, the types of production that he usually hops on, or at least in this sort of era of his career, and sort of putting him on the map in terms of underground hip-hop artists, and establishing him and his fellow artists in that community as being people to look out for. What were your guys' thoughts on this? I'm ready for this to be a pretty
it was long. Oh my goodness. No, okay. I'm not gonna say it was bad because I actually enjoyed it, believe it or not. But it was long. It was long.
No,
it was.
It's only an hour and 9 minutes. What are you talking about?
But it's 20 tracks and like, yeah, I don't know.
Here's the thing with me is. The length of it definitely was a thing for me, but I don't have anything really against long albums. I mean, there are like long albums that are over like an hour, even close to like an hour and 30 minutes. I will enjoy and I'll just blend in. But for something that already wasn't really grasping me from like the first 3 tracks, and for then the almost entire rest of the album to feel kind of like the same to me, it felt more like a chore to get through. But the thing is, if you were, like, I would not say that really any of the... I mean, there are a few songs that weren't really my thing, but if I were to just pick apart one of the songs, just, I don't know, maybe from, like, the latter half of the album, just pick apart that and listen to it just on its own, I probably couldn't find anything bad to say about it. But as an album listening experience, I just, around that last half, most of my notes were just not much to say. It's literally, for, like, more than four or five of the tracks, I just put not much to say just because, I don't know, it wasn't really connecting with me.
The tracks, I will say, there are 20 songs on this album, right? And, like, the majority of them are over 3 minutes. So a lot of them going over 4 and some into 5. Or some even at least close to 5.
I think there was one that went into 5, but there's 3 that are, like, less than a minute.
Yeah, okay, but I will say, in the first half... Actually, no, yeah, in the first half... I found I didn't really love a lot of the tracks, but there were like 3 that were really good to me, and those are probably my favorites. However, in the second half, I definitely enjoyed many more tracks than I did in the first half. Even if none of them were like, oh, this is really, really good. A lot of them are pretty good. I wouldn't call them as like good or as appealing to me as a lot of the tracks in the first half, but I don't know, it's a trade-off.
I will say that I think that the second half is more interesting than the first, but I'm more familiar with the first half, mainly because it is a long album, so a lot of the time when I am listening to it, I only get around to halfway, and then I have to stop listening for some reason. But going back to this for the podcast, I've forgotten how many just like great songs there are, and a lot of what has to do with quality, in my opinion, is what Aesop Rock is talking about and how he's saying it, and a lot of that can fall on deaf ears for people who don't really like to pick apart lyrics, or who maybe some can't even understand him because the way that the vocals are mixed, he does sort of like blend into the beats just a tad, and with how verbose he's being, it's kind of hard to follow along with what he's saying without a lyric sheet. But I'm taking nearly everything into account when talking about this album and scoring it. And I really think that this is a fantastic album, despite its length. I feel like there are a few songs that could have been left on the cutting room floor. But I feel like with each and every song, if you were to tell me, okay, how would you cut this down to make it a bit more concise? I couldn't do it. Every song I feel like is justified in its length, and therefore I feel like the album is justified in its length. And it is pretty long for a hip hop album. It's an hour and 9 minutes, and that can be a demanding request for someone to listen to. But I feel like the quality is consistent, that I was able to have a blast listening to this album, especially being able to pick apart some of the few lyrics here and there that Aesop Rock is talking about, and just being like, that's an interesting line. And then it makes you want to go back to the album later on and look at the lyrics and be like, holy crap, this guy's a genius, right? That's what I find so appealing about the album, is that it's sort of understated in its presentation, but once you dig deeper, it's like there's so much that you can pick apart.
Yeah. You feel me? Okay.
Do you guys have any tracks in particular that you have a problem with or you like?
No, it really, like, even on like 2 listens, it all just kind of blended together mostly for me. Like even on 2 listens of this, I don't know. I can't remember a lot of these.
Okay, so what I do with albums, right? Or at least what I try to do. I don't think I did this with the Madlib album, but I think I did it with this album. But what I do is I just do something while listening to the album, and then on another listen, I'll just like focus exclusively on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the only album that I can say this for. I had the exact same listening experience as I did focusing on it than when I didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
See, yeah, that's a good point to bring up. There are some albums that you really want to like focus in on when you're listening to them, and then there are some that you can literally just throw in the background, and then eventually it just melds together, and you almost forget that it's there. That might be the difference for me between Sound Ancestors and this album, because when I was listening to Sound Ancestors, I was taking notes for every track, and I was just going down the list, and I was really, really focused in on the album. And for this one, I started really focused in, and then eventually dialed back and started to work on other stuff. And then around that point is when I did, like, everything did start to feel like a slog for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, if you were to just pick out any track from really any point in the album, there's really nothing bad I don't think I could really say anything bad about it. Like there weren't really any tracks that I had that I really hated. Even if the second half did have other tracks that if I were to listen to them separately, they would be more interesting than the first half of the album. I really don't remember a lot of the second half of the album. And it's just because everything kind of faded.
I don't know how, but like it felt more like a slog in the first half to me. Because there were just like fewer tracks I liked, I guess. Or just fewer tracks I really liked or remembered enough. But I think the reason it felt like a slog to me in the first half more than the second half is because when I was in the first half and I like listened to the first track and I was like, this feels long. This is I have an hour and 7 more minutes of this album. Like and then all of a sudden just everything feels like it's going at a snail's pace, just in my perception, especially when like 2 tracks after that you have a 5-minute song and then a 4-minute song. But like either way, by the second half I was like full, like seatbelt in, now like I'm used to this, I guess. So like, and by the second half I was just like, okay, I know what's coming. I'm already halfway through. This doesn't feel as slow to me anymore. Especially because again, there is just a better abundance of tracks that appealed to me. But another thing, Aesop Rock's voice. We should talk about this. Okay, so
I don't have any problems with his voice.
Okay, well,
I don't either. I think it's
at the beginning, like it took me a while to get to a position where I was like, okay, I can listen to this album, no interruptions, let's go. So the first few like attempts were interrupted pretty early, and every time I walked away from that, like 2 or 3 tracks in, or sometimes even just like 1 track in, and I was just like, I don't know how well I can get into Aesop Rock's voice. But then I realized, like, that's stupid. Like, there's 1 track on his 2016 album, The Impossible Kid, called Kirby, that I really like. And I was like, I don't know. It's not his voice. I guess his voice just really sounds different in this album in 2000 compared to the one he made in 2016. And, like, because I knew for a fact that one of those I liked way more. This just kind of became harder to listen to in comparison.
I don't really because there is sort of a fundamental difference in Ace's voice. And I think it was his 2009 album None Shall Pass, where he sort of shifted into a lower register, a bit more gravelly. And along with that, with subsequent albums such as Skeleton, Impossible Kid, Malibu Ken, he sort of trimmed up his lyrics. They're not nearly as verbose. They're much easier to get into. His flows are more streamlined. Like another thing that I was going to say is that his flow on this album, it's so bizarre because it doesn't feel like a normal flow. It feels like he's just sort of like spouting poetry along with the beat, but he has these very subtle anchors throughout the rhythm of each bar, where eventually it does get to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, no, he actually is rapping, right? And a lot of the, like, he has these really bizarre like rhyme schemes, and the way that he's able to eventually connect those like later down in the track, I find it to be really interesting. But yeah, there is a fundamental sort of shift from modern era Aesop with earlier Aesop. I don't really prefer one or the other. I just think that they're different.
I do have something, I guess, to add on to the thing you were saying about, like, it sounds like poetry just over a beat. I think that has something to do with, like, I guess my opinions toward the album, because for me, when around the second half, when I just kind of dialed back and was paying attention to it, but wasn't really paying attention to it, I guess it felt like I could just take the vocals from one song and put it over the instrumental of another song, and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I understand.
Yeah.
The instrument, like, it gets really hard to, like, to distinguish a lot of the tracks on these. Like, I mean, I guess because I'm not a dedicated Aesop Rock, like, fan, or, like, someone who dives deep into the lyrics or anything, but, like, when you have an album this long, and with this many tracks, and with the tracks being as long as they are, it can get, it can get tough to make stuff that sounds distinct and memorable. And, like, while I don't think all of this is, like, I don't think it's a bad album. Like, I don't think it's bad that he has the sound of this, like locked down, like, really solid. But, like, yeah, it just gets really hard to differentiate one track from one another. And the fact, like, I didn't think about it this way, but when Alex said, like, you could just probably plop a vocal from any one track and put it onto an assortment of other tracks on this album, and it would be pretty hard to tell the difference. I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with that. Not for all the tracks, but for some of them.
I wholeheartedly disagree. I feel like for the mood that the album is going for, and Blockhead, the executive producer for the album, really does find, like, a signature sound or style that he locks into.
Blockhead's a real guy?
Yes.
I've never heard that name before. I thought it was like a character based on, like, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner thing.
No, that's why Breakfast with Blockhead, Lunch with Blockhead, and Dinner with Blockhead are literally just beats that go on for like a minute. It's because he's the producer. I disagree. I feel like there are a lot of really memorable spots within the album, and there are also tracks that sort of break up the flow a little bit. Like, I feel like the intro is a really great opener. It's really dark, brooding. It's only bass and drums, and features one of Aesop Rock's sort of most understated performances on the album. He's very sort of like lyrical and wilting, and he does this sort of inflection, right? And then you have literally the next song, and it's really grooving, not necessarily upbeat. It still keeps that melancholic mood, but it's more lively. There's more instrumentation. Then you have Big Bang with these bustling drums, heavy bass lines, really weird sort of like guitar.
Big Bang is my favorite track.
Big Bang is great. You have like the sort of waltzing strings in the background, and there's also that beat switch on the third verse where it peels back, and it's just like the violins and the drums. It's so like interesting. And again, moving down the track list: Basic Cable, Skip Town, 6B Panorama, Spare a Match, Attention Span, How to Be a Carpenter. Like, there's so many different like musical ideas throughout the beats on the album that I find, like, yes, How to Be in Carpenter, it features this like lone trumpet sample with these ethereal strings or synths or whatever, and it's just like wailing away into the beat, while Aesop Rock is lecturing you on how to be a carpenter. That's one of my favorite songs on the album, because he literally replaces the entire hook with just like, this is how you got to be a carpenter, do this, and it's so funny. This album has such a sharp sense of humor and satire that just in and of itself I find intriguing. But you add that to the way that he writes his lyrics, and then you get a song like 6B Panorama, which is literally Aesop going up onto his fire escape and just describing what he sees. And you get these really clever lines like a junkie tourniquet surgeon trying to find a vein to inject heroin into, and a pregnant woman on the verge of bursting. And it's just like, this is the stuff that I'm talking about, where sure, you can have it sort of on in the background when you're not really paying attention, but eventually,
when you do pay attention, you get like hidden gems.
Every once in a while, there are these lines that pop out, and it's like, that's a good line. That's funny. That's interesting. And then it's like, okay, I really like this album. There's only one song that I actually dislike, and it has more to do with the feature rather than the actual song itself. And I'll Be Okay.
Attention Span?
No. Attention Span is one of my favorite songs on the album.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah.
No, it's I'll Be Okay. And the reason why is because I don't think Slug does a very good job with his verse. He constantly sounds like he's trying to catch up with the beat, and especially when you compare that to Aesop's very lyrical sort of interpretation of his flow, it's like, yeah, no, Slug, you just really didn't cut it. And also you have the really cheesy harmonica sample with the weird guitars as well. It's just sort of clunky and weird, but that is the only weak spot on the album, in my opinion. I feel like every song is quality with a few dips here and there, but it doesn't get to like bad, except for I'll Be Okay. Every other song is consistent as fuck. I love this album so much. There's so many different highlights and like certain points that I could pick apart and just be like, this like I absolutely love this album. And it's an album that I have been listening to for probably 3 years, and I'm still finding like little pieces here and there that I've never noticed before. And I'm just like, every time I listen to this album, I love it more and more.
I will say that like I was more interested in instrumentals than the vocals for the most part, or not more interested. I just like found more to like in the instrumentals than I did in the, like, obviously there were bits where Same here. There were obviously a lot of bits like lyrically that just like I zoned out, and then one of them just like caught my ear all of a sudden, and I was momentarily back in attention. But I really like the instrumentals on this album, I will say. And when I was like, was this him? Was this self-produced? And I looked at most of it and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, this was him. Like my favorite track, Commencement at the Obedience Academy. I love that instrumental a lot. Like it reminds me of...
It is one of my favorites.
I don't know, I say this for every song, but I don't know where the sample is from, but it sounds really familiar. It reminds me a lot of my favorite soundtrack, the Space Funeral soundtrack. I don't know. I don't want to talk about that soundtrack until we get to a space where we can, or an episode where we can. But yeah, just like a lot of the instrumentals just reminded me of that kind of sound where it's like, I don't know. I'm bad at describing instrumentals, but there was a very distinct sound. I could distinguish the instrumentals more than I could the vocals, is what I'm saying.
I agree with that. The vocals are clear, but I think, I'm not saying I don't like his voice, but I'm saying I think just the way that his voice is, it kind of slurred in a little bit with some of the instrumentals.
Yeah.
Only some of them though. I couldn't really pinpoint exactly when or which songs, but I think it just like at some points I just kind of like didn't focus on his voice and just imagined it was a part of just like an instrumental, like a sample or something like that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do like favorite, least favorite score.
Yeah, I was about to say like we should just talk about like our favorite and least favorite.
Well, I already said my favorite. Just Commencement.
Yeah, Commencement.
I don't know what my
we'll
least favorite
just recap it.
This is really similar to the Madlib album, where it's like it's really hard to pinpoint a least favorite track because I don't like have any big like standout problems with any of them. It's more so that I just can't really remember most of them. Excuse me.
That's exactly my situation over here.
The easy out is like the 3 30-second interludes that kind of like scatter throughout like each part of the album. But I don't know. I like those.
I thought Lunch with Blockhead was actually really good.
Lunch with
21
yeah,
seconds.
Lunch with Blockhead is my favorite of the three.
Dinner with
those.
Blockhead, however, was like with Dinner with Blockhead, like that was the first thing that really stood out to me because it was like almost at the very end of the album. When Dinner with Blockhead came out, I was like, "Whoa, what's this?" I thought it was like one of the songs too. It's just like, oh, it's just a 30-second interlude.
I don't know if we could keep like doing least favorite tracks for when we have like albums like this, because I can't.
Well, it's fine if you can't pinpoint one. Like you don't.
No,
have
yeah,
to.
this is. We don't have to keep this all robotic.
I know
and
what my
stuff.
favorite track is. I think my favorite track is Spare Match.
Spare Match is really
what it is
good.
about the instrumental and his vocals in that song. I don't know what clicked for me, but it was so good. I don't know why the instrumental sounds like this, but like there's this one soundtrack for a Borderlands expansion, like a Borderlands 2 expansion, and it sounded like just like the town theme. There was just like I don't even remember what the town theme exactly sounded like, but I remember just hearing this song and thinking of that because it sounded so similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Oh yeah, score.
Score? Probably either 6 or 5.5 out of 10.
I would probably give this a 6 because I don't have any problems with it, but also I don't see myself listening to this full thing for a little while.
Or ever again.
No, I don't know about ever again. Like I would probably go back to this and listen to it in full in the background. Like this isn't something that I have to detox from, unlike another album which we might talk about in the future. But yeah, this isn't an album that I have to like take a break from, but it's just like, because you can return to this super easy, but this isn't one of those albums where it like hooks me in and it's like, oh, now I gotta listen to the full thing. If you like, score 6 if I didn't say that already.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say I will say this album is a slow burn and it gets better with time. The first couple of times that I listened to it, like for the first year that I was aware of this album, I was only really aware of all of the songs up to like 6B Panorama, and then everything after that it was just hazy and I didn't remember anything. But like slowly, once I started listening to it more and actually got through to the second half and listened to it more, you get songs like How to Be a Carpenter, No Splash, and it's just like, okay, yeah, there's more that this album has to offer, and I'm at the point now where I mean, this is one of my favorite hip hop albums of all time. If you're a hip hop fan, I think that it's essential, especially if you're an Aesop Rock fan and you haven't reached into this part of his discography yet. I think it's a really great album. My favorite tracks are this is going to be a bit of a long list, but Float, Commencement at the Obedience Ceremony, Big Bang, Garbage, Basic Cable, which we didn't really talk about.
Oh yeah, Basic Cable is my second favorite.
Yeah,
I really like that
Basic
one.
Cable I find to be interesting because it offers really, really sharp commentary on television while not being preachy, because Aesop also falls to the same sort of sins and desires that TV offers as the people that he's criticizing. Like he's not above that criticism that he's giving, and I find it to be really, really funny. With lines like be my mother while she's gone, and then like literally the next line he's talking about like, oh yes, wipe the dribble off of my lip, please, just take care of me. I just find it to be really funny. Oxygen, Skip Town.
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like once you listen to these to more of the album more often, you'll start to find like really, really funny lines that you just didn't like listen to, that you didn't hear the first time. Oxygen, Skip Town, which has a really, really great reggae instrumental or sample that he pulls from. We didn't really talk about that. 6B Panorama, that's one of my absolute favorites. Lunch with Blockhead is the best of the 3 instrumental pieces. Attention Span featuring Vast Air, which is a much, much better pairing for Aesop than Slug, despite the fact that they literally went on to make some collaborative albums together. But Vast Air the next year would go on to do Cannibal Ox, which is another groundbreaking underground hip-hop album that I also need to give a listen to. I haven't really listened to that one yet, but How to Be a Carpenter is hilarious. Prosperity. No Splash I thought was bizarre because the entirety of the vocals are these like grouped gang vocals, but it's all Aesop Rock and it's for the entirety of the song. It reminded me of Learn to Love Hate by Quelle Chris for some reason, where just the entire song is done with these doubled vocals and it makes for a really chilling and eerie effect. and the hook is literally just these random words being repeated by this monotone voice that I just found it to be pretty haunting. Drawbridge, and then The Mayor and the Crook. And my least favorite track is I'll Be Okay, and my score is 9 out of 10. I really, really love this album. I think it is a
well, I thought it was
classic.
Garbage, and I'm gonna float it into the sun.
Yeah, stupid.
No, okay.
Okay,
No. So no, but in all seriousness, I guess as an album listening experience,
not too much seriousness.
It didn't grasp me, and I had no expectations going into this at all. I will say my favorite track was Big Bang. That was the one that Big Bang was the one that really caught my ear before it started to kind of blend all together. Of course, this is my point of view right now. If I ever go back to this, whatever, scores change. Is all I'm saying. But in this time right now, I'd probably give it like a 3 to 3.5.
Really? Oh wow!
Yikes! Wow.
That's much lower than I was getting from Vocabulary.
I was thinking of 4, but I realized how much of the tracks that I really, really don't remember at all.
Yeah, I will say that memorability, it can be a bit of an issue for someone that's not like, okay, I'm ready to pay attention to the lyrics, and because it does demand a lot of your attention, but you need to be focusing in the right places. If you just give it like a cursory listen while you're taking notes, then it's going to eventually blend in together. But if you're like following along with the lyrics on Genius or something like that, I feel like you could get a lot more out of this album. And the fact that Ace's verses are so verbose, like you really do have to pay attention to keep up. So you start to pay attention to some of the smaller things in the track list. And like I was saying, there are other things that just sort of pop out immediately. Like that one part on Oxygen, where it's like the third verse, but it just sort of breaks down for a little bit, and it's a back and forth between himself, and he's like talking to himself on what he should do.
I like that.
It's like stuff like that where it's like again, it's just like that's really clever, and you don't really notice those until you know how to listen to it. It is an album that you sort of warm up to with time, or at least that's what my case was with it.
Yeah. I was saying, it was like I was willing to take notes, because I listened to Madlib first. Throughout all of Madlib, I was taking notes on it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a part that I really liked about that song, and I was taking notes at the very beginning of Float, but yeah, it just kind of dipped down after a while, and I didn't have much to say. So
I feel like if this album was 3 EPs, I would give them each a much higher score. Because like while you were saying some things about your favorite tracks, Riley, I was going back. I have Spotify open. I was just clicking on them, seeing like, oh, which one was that again? And all of the songs are good, I'd say. Not all of them, of course. Like, I agree with you, I'll Be Okay is not good. I feel like all of the songs are good. I just felt like the length of this album is really just not helping it.
Yeah.
I'm still not entirely convinced about the length of this album being justified. And I'm not saying that an hour is, like, unheard of or anything, but, like, I don't know. It definitely becomes much more apparent that it's an hour long when it's split across 20 tracks.
Yeah.
And all of the tracks are like pushing 4 minutes, even 5 minutes on some of them.
Yeah. But again, like what I was saying, like if you're paying attention, like we didn't even really touch on Ace's lyrics. Like, of course I did, because I've listened to this album so many times. But if you really do pay attention to the lyrics, there's so much to dissect in those alone that if you're focusing on them, that's when it starts to become more apparent that that's the focal point of the album, is what Ace is saying, and again how he's saying it. There are albums where you can sort of listen to the lyrics just as they're coming at you, and you sort of get the gist of it. But because of how esoteric Aesop is, especially at this point in his career, it gets to be a lot, right?
Yeah.
And even when I was trying to listen to the album and focusing on the lyrics, I was like, oh man, there's still so much to pick apart, just with each individual line, and it's comes very rarely where there's a line that you actually understand just on its base meaning alone. Like literally the first line of the entire album is "This fallen angel could stitch a wing with a shoestring." What the hell does that mean?
It's nothing.
Right? It gets so like hyper specific to Ace's experience and the things that he's endured and how he writes, that it gets to be sort of like it gets to be a turnoff for a lot of people. And a lot of critics of Aesop Rock say that his songs don't mean anything and they're just, verbose wordplay to throw on top of a beat, which I disagree with. I feel like he says a lot of things within his tracks, but you just need to be focusing on the right thing in order to understand them. And I feel like the lyrics are probably the best part of the album, and it sucks that we didn't really get to talk about them, but it is something that comes to you with repeated listens. And again, I've been listening to this album for years, and I still find things that I've never really paid attention to before. But yeah.
But what do we know? What do we know?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying that any of your guys' criticisms was invalid. I feel like for outsiders to underground hip hop, I mean, from what I understand, you guys are like it can be a bit of
it's an acquired taste.
Cut this out of the podcast, but I was I'm just gonna make that like a running bit, like at the very end was like, well, but what do we know? But cut this out of the podcast. Don't put this in.
Okay, that's staying in.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, in terms of opening lines on the song, and again, it took me a few listens to really, like some songs, it just takes you a few listens for you to know, like, oh, this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because on the first, like, couple of attempted listens, when I only got, like, a few tracks far, when I got to track 2, I didn't really think much of it, but on the first, like, full listen, when I listened to track 2, and, like, the instrumental came in, and then he said, like, in terms of opening lines, you said the one in Float, I prefer the brand in track 2. The harvest appeared less plentiful than last season. Because that
entire opening is so good.
As soon as he said that, I was like, all right, I got it. I'm in.
Harvest appeared less plentiful than last season. I imagine sloppy seed handling evoked a stroke of tardy planting and the crops we'd have harvest mid-November. It goes on for so long, and it's so consistent too. I really, really wish we could have delved into the lyrics, but it is hard to listen to. And we didn't even get into like what each of the songs were talking about. Really, the only one that we talked about was like 6B Panorama and Basic Cable. But there are so many different like themes that you can pick up on throughout the record that I feel give it a really good sense of cohesion, despite the fact that you guys think that it's overly long. I think it works really well as an album, despite it being an hour long. Do we want to move on to the recommendation for next time? Usually once we're done with the second album, once we actually get an audience, we're going to try and open up a Q&A section. But, depending on how many people listen to this, if you want to ask us a question, just leave it in the comments and we might talk about it in the next episode. But apart from that, I don't think we have much else to talk about. Going on to recommendation. If you want to understand what the hell we're talking about in the next episode, then listen to the album before the next episode comes out 2 Saturdays from now. Andy, what is your recommendation?
Me? Oh, okay. I've known what I was going to recommend. And a part of me was considering, like, when I first found this album, okay, no, I don't want to give a long intro. It's Herbivore by Jacob 2-2, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And it is also an instrumental album, but it's only like 30 to 40 minutes, I think. I think like 36, if I'm remembering correctly. Its name is Herbivore, and it is very good, and it is a big influence on how I make music and my taste in instrumental music and like samples and vocal samples. I will say, before you listen to this album, I will say I am already anticipating like a few criticisms that you will have with this album, and I'm going to say right now, I really don't have any defense for those. Like, they're there, and they're valid, and I'm honestly, like, whether you see it, like, I'm at a position where it doesn't bother me, but if they come in and bother you, then, I get it, I guess. But, they're no problem for me. I adore this album. It's one of my favorites of all time, but I think there are, like, 1 or 2 problems that some of you may have that I really can I really can't I like this album. I think all of you will get a lot out of this album, and it's short, so can't be that bad.
Well, we'll have to give it a listen.
So the recommendation for the next episode is Herbivore by Jacob 2-2. I hope you all have a wonderful week, whatever you guys decide to do. And
Riley,
have a good one.
well, actually, I'm going to end this off with my famous opera. So.
Oh yeah, okay, go on.
Cut it there. No, cut it there.